So we're here. We're obviously going to place you under arrest. There's a warrant for your arrest. We're going to take you to the jail. I told your mom that she can contact a bondsman.
A tearful teen is taken into custody after committing brutal crimes against girls he dated. He may look meek in police body camera footage, but police say he assaulted, raped, and even strangled fellow teenagers. And a surprise sweetheart deal took his prison term from a possible 70 years down to 0. We're taking a closer look at how the teen and his mom reacted to police taking him into custody. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Hey, before we get into this episode of On the Case, I want to talk about our partner and sponsor, Upside. This is a free app that gives you cash back when you buy daily essentials like gas and groceries. Upside is so easy, it's free to use. I use it a lot when I pump gas. It also works at convenience stores like 7-Eleven or your favorite fast food place like Taco Bell. And again, we're talking about real cash here. So after you spend, money appears in your Upside account and then you transfer that straight to your bank. So here's what you do. Download the Upside app for free and buy whatever you plan to purchase. You pay as usual with your debit or credit card. Then you file a claim in the Upside app and then you get your money back. So to find out how much you could save with Upside, click the link in the description or scan the QR code on your screen and use our promo code OTC to get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon of your first tank of gas. An Oklahoma high school baseball player's name and face are now known across the country, and it's not for good reason. In August, 18-year-old Jesse Butler of Stillwater, Oklahoma, entered a no contest plea to 11 heinous charges, including rape, attempted forced oral sodomy, and more. He was staring down a nearly 80-year prison sentence, but in a shocking twist, the court agreed to grant Butler youthful offender status, and instead of going to prison, Butler went home with instructions on how to complete counseling and community service requirements. Butler's exact treatment plan, it's sealed in the court record, but the district attorney's office released this statement, quote, "The youthful offender sentence imposed against Jesse Butler requires him to complete his rehabilitation plan successfully, including an aggressive schedule of therapy with a specialist in sex offender treatment, and should he fail, he faces reclassification as an adult and a sentence of 10 years in prison." The change in punishment sent shockwaves through the community. It devastated the two girls who had gone to school officials to report what Butler had done to them. A mom of one of the victims told the outlet Tulsa World that the families were completely against youthful offender status from the beginning and said that it was their understanding that the prosecutor trying this case would not accept a deal like that. Photos have been released showing one of the victims in the hospital after apparently repeated assaults by Butler. The victim's family says she ended up needing surgery because of severe damage to a vein in her neck. There are calls for the judge who approved Butler's deal, Special Judge Susan Worthington, to be reprimanded or removed for okaying this deal. Now, in just a moment, I'll talk to a judge who has advocated for youthful offender programs to discuss whether this one is a step too far. But first, I want to let you know what two official affidavits have to say about Butler's behavior and how he reacted when he found out he'd actually be taken into custody. According to the first affidavit, a 16-year-old identified by her initials LS told a school resource officer in September of 2024 that she dated Jesse Butler for a few months earlier in the year, and that during that time, he physically and sexually assaulted her multiple times, including trying to rape her inside his car outside an ice cream shop the previous February. The affidavit reads, quote, "LS reported she yelled and told him no repeatedly and tried to push him off of her, but was unable to overpower him. LS reported Butler told her he was sorry for what he had to do, but he had to do it. LS recalled hyperventilating because Butler intended to have sexual intercourse with her and she did not want to." According to LS, a woman must have heard her screaming because she walked up to the car and interrupted them. LS told police that Butler told her that if the police came, they would both be in trouble. He reportedly took her back to his home where her car was parked and tried to rape her again. The affidavit reads, quote, "LS told Butler she needed to get home, but Butler pulled her on top of him and told her, 'You're not going until I'm finished.'" She said she was able to get away and go home, but this wasn't the only time that an adult may have witnessed Butler trying to assault LS. The teen says that she was at the Butler home in their movie room when Butler took his clothes off and tried to have sex with her. She says Butler's mom came to the door asking if everything was okay, but the affidavit doesn't say anything else about her reaction to what she might have seen or heard. In late February of 2024, Butler reportedly strangled her because she refused to have sex with him. The affidavit says, quote, LS reported she was hyperventilating and then recalled her vision being blurry and she was dizzy. She reported her head immediately hurt and she was confused about what had occurred. She was scared of Butler, but when she regained consciousness, Butler was laughing at her. Following this incident, LS reported she had a handprint and an injury on her neck. Butler and LS apparently broke up in March 2024, and he started dating a girl identified as KS, and his disturbing and aggressive behavior allegedly continued. A second affidavit details the assaults KS says she suffered during the relationship. Quote, KS reported Butler had left bruises on her hips from squeezing her so tightly. KS reported the intercourse was extremely aggressive, but she reported she quickly stopped fighting it because Butler would overpower her and hurt her to get his way. KS explained that she learned what to and what not to do to avoid being hurt by Butler. According to KS, Butler would pin her down and she was physically unable to get him off of her. KS stated this would often lead her to hyperventilate, which Butler thought was funny. According to the affidavit, Butler also strangled KS so long that she eventually passed out. She reported she woke up on the floor of the living room in a home where she was house sitting. She claims Butler was livid that she wouldn't have sex with him in someone else's home, so she says he raped her instead. Later that same week, KS reported that Butler choked her again, and it's for a sick reason. The affidavit says, quote, KS stated Butler told her he wanted to strangle her so he could film it on his phone. And if you can believe it, police found that video on Butler's phone, which showed him choking KS until she passed out. Butler was charged in March 2025 with 10 counts. An 11th was eventually tacked on when he reportedly violated a protective order. And we got our hands on body camera footage from Stillwater police that shows officers arriving at the Butler home and taking the teary-eyed young man into custody.
We're ready to obviously tell our story too.
Yeah.
Jess, it's Mom. Open the door. It's me.
And if you'll just have him step out.
Okay. Give me your wallet and phone and stuff. So, okay. Your what?
They're in the car.
Well, okay, it's fine. It's not locked or anything, is it? Okay. So, can you tell him what you just told me, or?
Yeah, so we're here, we're obviously going to place you under arrest. There's a warrant for your arrest. We're going to take you to the jail. I told your mom that she can contact a bondsman, and you shouldn't be there very long, but there just is a process for paperwork and stuff. But right now you do have to come with us, and I do have to put you in handcuffs, so turn around for me.
You have to put him in handcuffs?
I
Yeah, if we're asking the common transport somebody in custody.
You know we're going to win this. It's okay.
Do you have a... Yeah.
I'll get you out. For me? All right. Stay silent. Rick knows about this. Candy's on this. Dad's on his way. We're coming to get you, okay? Stay strong, okay? Say your prayers.
Okay, so he's going to go right to the city of Stillwater jail, and if you'll just contact her, then she does this all the time. She knows what to do.
Yep.
Make sure
Okay.
she knows Stillwater Police Department, not a county.
Yeah.
Stillwater Police Department.
We're the ones
On
that-
Lewis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let them know that
perfect.
we're the ones that picked him up.
And
They
when
don't-
you say we are the ones.
Stillwater PD.
Stillwater PD.
Yeah.
Okay.
That way they don't think he went like straight over and he's over at the county.
Awful experience for the child.
Are you gonna pass the people? Yeah. Make that chart. Gonna pass it down. Spread your feet for me. Nothing in your socks.
Love you, Jess. See you in a bit.
Butler was released on a $25,000 bond. When he entered his no contest plea over the summer, the mom of LS shared her victim impact statement online, and it says in part, quote, "I've had to carry this weight while going to school, trying to act like I'm okay. I've woken up from nightmares that make me feel like I'm being attacked all over again. I've had to explain bruises, explain silence, explain why I started isolating from people who loved me. You didn't just strangle me with your hands, you strangled my voice, my joy, my ability to feel safe in my own body. I will never forget the night you strangled me unconscious because I said no. The moment changed my life. A medical professional later told me that I was just 30 seconds away from dying. 30 seconds. If you had just kept your hands on my neck just a little longer, I wouldn't be standing here today. That wasn't just a scare. It was a near-death experience. You didn't just hurt me, you nearly killed me." LS also addressed Butler's mom and dad in her statement, saying, quote, "To Jesse's parents, I don't know what you know. I don't know if you heard me crying through the walls or noticed how your son treated me when no one was looking. But I hope you hear this now. Your son hurt me in ways that cannot be undone, and I need you to understand that your silence, your protection of him, or even your denial, that would hurt too. Because someone should have stopped this. Someone should have seen the bruises and the fear." My colleague, Law&Crime's Jesse Weber, recently sat down with Justin Shepard, known on social media as Just in the Nick of Crime, who did some of the first reporting on this story and spoke with people in Stillwater.
What have you learned here about how this is even possible? Because I will tell you, there is a lot of speculation online right now that the Butler family may have connections that may have helped him get this so-called sweetheart deal. We couldn't confirm that. What can you tell us?
So I've spoken with some of the families as well of both victims who came forward against Jesse. There is a third victim who, if she hasn't come forward, but can you blame her when you look at this as the justice that they get? So there's a third victim. And kind of like you said, the speculation is that Jesse Mac Butler's father is a man by the name of Mac Butler. And he was the head of football operations at OSU for, I forget how many years, but for a pretty long time. He's, kind of a staple in that community. And when we're talking about Stillwater, Oklahoma, and we're talking about OSU, for people who don't know, Stillwater is the town that Oklahoma State University is in. So there's a lot of things tied to that. Mac Butler, it seems that he grew up there. His wife currently works for OSU. His daughter works for the public school system there. He was apparently had been hired as like a coach of some kind for Stillwater High School as well. So somebody with deep-rooted ties into the community, and that then leads you to the judge in this case, or one of the judges in this case, Judge Susan Worthington. Between her and her father, the Worthingtons have had a hold on that bench for over 50 years. So while you can't necessarily say definitively that, hey, there's this connection here because he's deep-rooted in football, she's a judge, they all grew up in the same town, that there's this kind of connection, but it's not really many difficult mental gymnastics to make that leap, right? That, hey, this is a town that requires the college, needs the college to survive. It's very deep rooted into the system, that they're very much supportive of OSU, for this whole kind of thing to be very close knit. And that's kind of what's being speculated, to the point that even it's now gotten the attention of one of Oklahoma's lawmakers, Representative J.J. Humphrey, who's also running for lieutenant governor. I'm actually going to be speaking with him later tonight, a little bit more details, but
yeah, and if you can, I don't know if you've spoken with him already, but Representative Humphrey is talking, my understanding is about a potential investigation into this. Is this true? Is there going to be a formal investigation into what happened here?
It sounds that way, yeah. He kind of looks at it from the same way. He was telling me that he's got a lot of background, in the court system and investigation before he got into politics. And he said, basically kind of the same thing that we were just talking about, that can he say definitively, or can he prove right now that there's a connection? No, but his exact words, but it sure as hell smacks like it, And so he's like, it's worth an investigation. So he's thinking about, wanting to put a grand jury together to do an indictment, possibly, the conversation we had, which will go a little bit more in depth, and I don't know if that could bring additional charges against Jesse, because when you look again at the litany of charges, there are some that should have been on there that weren't. Like, in my opinion, as not a lawyer, why he wasn't charged with attempted murder when one of the girls was near death for what he did. And so those are kind of the conversations, but he feels that not just Stillwater, that entire county, Payne County, and then other places in Oklahoma, there's a lot of, he said it flat out, there's corruption, and he believes that this is no different than that. and it merits an investigation.
Joining us now to talk more about this case is Judge Brandon Birmingham from Dallas, Texas. Thank you, sir, for being with us here on Law and Crime. In this case, there's youthful offender status, which is what the defendant received in this case. Just first explain, I know this is something that you know well about in your district where you work as a judge. What is youthful offender status?
It is a status that's assigned really to those that are juveniles or on the cusp of being a juvenile, where the punishment for certain crimes is lesser than it would be for an adult. And they have certain programs, certain conditions under the law that the judge can order somebody to go through, and it's a little different for those that are younger than it is for adults.
How does that compare to, because in this case, the defendant was 18 years old at the time that this deal was reached, but it's not a situation where maybe he was 15 years old or 14 where this would be a juvenile case. How does the youthful offender status compare to what you might see in a juvenile case?
It's just a function of punishment. I think there's the idea in assessing a punishment that, those that are younger are more likely to make mistakes and need to learn from those mistakes, as opposed to somebody who's, let's say, in their mid-20s or maybe in their 30s, or that's an adult that we expect them to behave in a certain way. And there's maybe not laws that are written in a formula, but I think when considering what a person's punishment ought to be, somebody's age and experience has always been taken into account.
In this particular case, this was a no contest plea, so this was a deal that was reached between the defense and the prosecution. For you as a judge, just when these cases go through, and what is your role in this? Because I think for there to be in a case like this where there is going to be criticism, and that's just the way it is, and I know with your job that there's always going to be criticism of the system in these types of cases. What is the job of a judge? What are you looking for if a prosecutor and a defense attorney come to you and say, we've reached this agreement that youthful offender status is what we're going to move forward with?
Well, the job of a judge really is to make sure that all of the processes are followed to a T, and that everybody, both sides, I say everybody, both sides has availed themselves to the opportunities under the law to be prepared and to have what they need in order to be prepared. So you're really at that point sort of an umpire that's just making sure that all the boxes have been checked. We do have the discretion and the ability to reject a plea, and if we reject a plea, then we don't get to just put our own stamp on it and say, I reject the plea and I'm going to sentence you to 50 years. Essentially what the rejection of a plea does is it takes everybody to square one and puts it on the trial docket. But that is an extraordinary remedy, and so what you're looking for at the plea is what information has led both sides to come to this agreement, and the judge has the ability, if they want to seek out that information. And because we do have the ability to say, no, we're not going to accept it. It's unjust, or it's unfair, or the process hasn't been followed.
And in this case, Butler could have received, if the maximum, if he had gone to trial all the way through, the maximum would have been roughly 70 years in prison. Instead, through this youthful offender status, he is going to have a treatment plan that he has to go through with different requirements that he's going to have to meet. But you look at what he was accused of in this case, and it's very difficult to read through. It was violent. What are some of the factors that a prosecutor and the defense attorney you're working with, when determining that youthful offender status is a good resolution for this, how does maybe violent tendencies, the threat of maybe reoffending, how does that go into whether or not this person would be a good candidate for this, as opposed to what could have been, the good majority of his life in prison?
Yeah, you're looking at a prediction of what you think might happen in the future, essentially. That's one component of assessing punishment or an outcome in a criminal case. And one of the ideas is that somebody's history will indicate how they're going to act in the future. And so when you're saying, okay, does this person deserve more, a lighter sentence or rehabilitation, you're asking yourself first, can they be rehabilitated? And is there still hope for them to be rehabilitated? That's one component of a very complicated and nuanced issue. The other one, of course, is what are the facts of the case? In other words, if somebody could commit a horrible crime, they might have all the potential to be rehabilitated, but the crime itself is such that maybe that they just need to be punished. And there's always that tension between what's best for the defendant on the one hand, what's best for society, and then of course what's best for the victim and what their voice is and how that voice is heard in the sentencing process. But all of it, to go back to your first question, the lawyers are assessing their cases, and there's strengths and weaknesses in every case, and allegations are allegations. You've got to eventually, if you're the prosecution, line up your proof and make sure that you're right, because you don't want to lose. You don't want to even go forward if you're not right. And so I think plea bargains are also a function of the quality of proof by view of how the lawyers assess their case. And so unfortunately, with a plea bargain, the public doesn't always have all of the information because there's no trial. And the trials, why I love trials so much is because you do get all the information. You get to see the witnesses, you get to judge their credibility, you get to see text messages or videos and all that. In a plea, the public really doesn't, so we are sort of left to speculate. But as a plea bargain, and somebody who's presided over thousands of them and done them myself, plea bargains are functions of proof and your assessment of how strong your case is, whichever side that you're on.
And this is a case, and I think when you read the allegations against this defendant, you hear, the victim impact statements. I mean, it's hard not to be emotional for what these girls had to go through. And I'm sure the judge who presided over this deal knew that there was probably going to be some criticism of it, considering there wasn't going to be 70 years or a period of time in adult prison because he's 18 years old. Not asking your opinion of the decision for this to be youthful offender status, but just as a judge, I mean, it's so rare that we get to actually talk to someone who sits in the chair. How do you deal with some of those deals that may come across that are public, that may have criticism of it, and knowing that you're presiding over something that's probably going to get a lot of heat from the public and from people? Yeah, there is probably information we don't know in this case, but that there's going to be a lot of frustration from the public when it goes through.
And I've been in that situation before many times, some of it in very public settings and some of it not public. But either way, as a judge, that every decision you make, you're going to disappoint precisely half of the people that are looking back at you, and sometimes everybody. And so what you have to do is fall back on what your role is as a judge. And we are process followers. We make sure that the process is followed. We also make sure that everybody stays within their roles. And so that is procedural justice, procedural due process. And so we have to adhere to that. The public outrage is going to come. And we're not here to be popular. We're here to be stewards of the law. I think that, there's accountability for that too, in the sense that the decisions we make, we are not the end-all be-all. If there is something untoward that's gone on in any given case, there's a process in place, a review process. We answer, unlike the Supreme Court justices of the United States, we do have a reviewing body that looks at whether we did something that was outside of our processes. And we have to be held accountable for that, and we should be. There should be a transparency. I guess the line is that we could never be held accountable for a decision that we make within the realm of discretion. We can always be held accountable for decisions we make that are outside of that process, outside of the law, whether it's ex parte communications, bribery, things like that. That is where we can be held accountable. We can be held to answer for that. I think we're seeing now, there's a call for an investigation, I think, into some of, what caused this plea to happen in Oklahoma. And I would hope that to the extent that it can be transparent and accessible to the public, and I'm sure everybody involved is going to take that responsibility very seriously and justify why they did it, or at least make sure that there was nothing outside of that zone of discretion that played into this.
For Butler, once he finishes the treatment plan that he's going to be going through, is there any sort of monitoring of him that could continue on? Like, I think of someone who, if he was 26 years old, he goes to prison, he might be a registered sex offender when he comes out, and he has to follow those guidelines. In many states, it would be for the rest of your life. In a youthful offender status situation like this, once he finishes the treatment plan, what would happen next?
Well, if he finishes it successfully, he doesn't go to prison. I think that one of the parts of this is that he has to complete it, and if he doesn't, then he's looking at, I believe, up to 10 years in prison as a result of that. So there is some accountability for him to finish, but if he finishes it successfully, then he's off of what is very similar, I guess, to like a probation. You know, he's off of that status, and he's free to live out the rest of his life.
And and obviously too, I mean, anytime you Google his name, for the rest of his life, there's a weight that comes with that, because he will be associated, with this case, which is so difficult to hear. When it comes to recidivism rates, and I know that that's always a big topic of conversation. I mean, how effective, not speaking in terms of this case, but just generally speaking, are these youthful offender status cases?
Well, they can be very effective. In the right environment and for the right crime. I actually started a youthful offenders program here in Dallas, and it was geared towards those 17 to 25-year-olds that did dumb things when they were 17 to 25. And I don't mean to say that this is one of those things. They're geared towards certain crimes, but with the right environment, you try to seek out the root causes of the problems. Now, that could be substance abuse, that could be mental health, and if you can treat those problems, then you go a long way towards making sure this doesn't happen again. But that it should not be used as a way to get out from under accountability and punishment in the appropriate circumstance. So it's that tension that we talked about right at the very beginning. What's best for the defendant, what's best for the public, and of course, what's best for the victim. And they're having their day in court as well.
Yeah, and this is just it's a sad case. You think of these two young girls, the strength and courage they had to come forward. I know their parents have been frustrated with this. We'll see how any sort of investigation plays out in it. And one more, actually, as I think about that, if there is a plea deal that the public's unhappy with, like in this one, I mean, is there any way other than an investigation to find something that happened outside of the law, any way to do any sort of take back on that deal and re-sentence someone like Butler in this case?
No, once the plea is done, it's final. There's going to be no, there's certain procedural things that would have to happen in order for somebody to grant a new trial. Public outrage is not one of them. And so this is done, it appears. Maybe if there's another victim, then maybe, that's a whole new that's a whole new case. But for accountability, it's going to have to come through a judicial conduct commission, something like that. It's going to have to come through, an investigation. I understand that one of the lawmakers in Oklahoma has called for an investigation that would involve the grand jury, and they have at their disposal tools to subpoena witnesses and to see if, again, going back to what we talked about a little while ago, is did something happen in this case that was beyond the scope of discretion? Is there some kind of an outside influence, like ex parte communications is the most obvious one that might come up, that would cause those that made the decisions to be held accountable in some way? And how does that happen? That happens usually during the reappointment process. I know that in Texas we elect judges, and if this happened and the public was outraged, then they would remove me from the bench. I could be sanctioned and removed from the bench by the Judicial Conduct Commission as well. And so that's the accountability that could happen as a result of the investigation. And then, of course, if a grand jury comes back and they find evidence to believe there's probable cause that somebody committed a crime, then they can return an indictment, and that would open up a whole new avenue of accountability as well.
And we'll see how this case plays out. Judge Brandon Birmingham from Dallas, Texas, thank you, sir, for taking the time to be with us on Law and Crime. It's great to have you.
It's always good to be here. Thank you very much. Good luck.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. I'll see you next time.